General intent crimes that I want you to know are rape, battery, arson, mayhem, involuntary manslaughter, and depraved heart murder. Once again, general intent crimes are rape, battery, arson, mayhem, involuntary manslaughter, and depraved heart murder. The next one under mistake, the second type of mistake that we're going to go over, is mistake of law. The rule for mistake of law is, if the defendant's conduct is illegal, the mistake of law is no defense, even if he thinks his conduct is legal. Again, if the defendant's conduct is illegal, his mistake of law is no defense, even if he thinks it is legal. So basically, that rule basically is stating ignorance of the law is no defense. We all know that statement already. Lay people know that statement. Ignorance of law is no defense. So an example, even if you get bad advice from a lawyer that an act is legal, that's not going to be a defense. Bad advice from a lawyer that an act is legal is no defense to a crime. Sorry. There is one exception to mistake of law, and that is where it can be traced to a contradictory government law. Again, one exception to the mistake of law is where you can actually point and show a traceable law that is contradictory government law. That's the only time that mistake of law is going to be valid, when there is a law on the books and you can find it and it contradicts that particular law. So again, there's mistake of fact and mistake of law. All right? Those are the two main types of mistake. Moving forward to the next one, number 6 under excuses is duress or coercion. Again, number 6 under excuses is duress or coercion. The definition is when the defendant commits a crime due to imminent threat of serious bodily injury. Again, duress is where someone is threatening someone and forcing them to commit a crime. So the definition is when the defendant commits a crime due to imminent threats of death or serious injury. I want you to know, and this is very important, that duress is not a defense to homicide. Once again, duress is not a defense to homicide. The next one is entrapment. Definition is a government or police action that induced the defendant to commit a crime that he or she was not predisposed to commit prior to initial contact from the government or the police. Once again, entrapment is government or police action that induces the defendant to commit a crime that he or she was not predisposed to commit prior to initial contact by the government or police. So basically what you're going to see is this nice regular guy going about his business, and the police come up and they get him to sell drugs somehow. So the classic example is the DeLorean guy. That was the defense that he used, and some of you may be too young to remember that, but it's basically he used entrapment. He was under a great deal of stress. His business was going under, and some governmental entity came up and talked him into getting involved in a big cocaine deal. And he used the defense of entrapment, saying that he would never have gotten into the sale of drugs had he not been contacted specifically by this governmental entity, these police undercover agents that induced him to do it. He was not predisposed to do it. He had never committed crimes before, was never guilty of crimes before, never in the area of cocaine, but they knew that he was under a great deal of pressure, financial pressure, and they induced him to commit a crime that he was not predisposed to, and he was found not guilty under those terms. The next one under defenses is mitigation. That's number 3 under the types of defenses. And there are basically 5 types of mitigation. Let's go over the 5 types of mitigation. Number 1 is heat of passion killings. Number 2, imperfect self-defense. Number 3, mistaken justification. Number 4, coercion or duress, and number 5 is diminished capacity. Let's go over the first one, which is heat of passion killings. Basically, heat of passion killings is going to mitigate a murder down to voluntary manslaughter. Once again, killings that are done in the heat of passion is going to mitigate a murder down to a voluntary manslaughter. You need 3 elements to mitigate a murder down to a manslaughter. Those are, number 1, adequate provocation. A guy comes home and finds his wife in bed with another woman. Number 2, he had no time to cool off. He immediately goes to the side of the bed, grabs inside of his dresser drawer, pulls out a gun, and shoots and kills them both. Number 3, he has an actual loss of mental equilibrium. Just snaps, doesn't know what he's doing, and does it just so fast out of the heat of passion, okay? Remember, it's heat of passion killings. There are 3 elements that you need to have. Number 1, adequate provocation. Number 2, no time to cool off. And number 3, an actual loss of mental equilibrium. The second area of mitigation is called the imperfect self-defense. And that is where you have an unreasonable belief in the need for self-defense. Once again, imperfect self-defense, it's where the defendant has an unreasonable belief in the need for self-defense. Number 3 is mistaken justification. So the rule says when one comes to the aid of another, they either step into the shoes of the other, or it's where they use excessive force. Once again, mistaken justification is when one comes to the aid of another and they step into the shoes of that other person. So I used as an example earlier where there was 2 people in an alley and one has a gun on him, and but when you walk by, it appears as if they are being robbed, but in actuality, it's a police officer arresting somebody. But you think you're coming to the aid of someone who is being robbed. So you go after the police officer with the gun. It is a mistaken justification. That is the defense that you would use in that particular situation. If the defendant then goes and punches the cop, and rather than being guilty of a battery, he's going to use mistaken justification as his defense, okay? The next one is coercion or duress. And again, coercion or duress is the same as we discussed earlier in justification. Here, sometimes we can use it also as a mitigation. And remember, it's not a defense to murder. Once again, coercion or duress is not a defense to murder, but it is, you can use it both as an excuse and as mitigation. Number 5 is diminished capacity, and we went over that earlier. It can be used both as an excuse and as mitigation, and diminished capacity will negate specific intent elements needed for a specific intent crimes. Once again, diminished capacity will negate specific intent elements needed for specific intent crimes. Just to recap, diminished capacity will negate specific intent elements needed for specific intent crimes. All right, I just want to recap mitigation. Mitigation, there are basically the 5 types. There's the heat of passion killings, there is imperfect self-defense, mistaken justification, coercion, and duress, and then number 5 is diminished capacity. So that is all of the defenses that someone could use in defenses to crimes. I just want to really quickly recap all of the 3 areas of defenses to crimes. 3 categories of defenses to crimes are justification, excuse, and mitigation. Again, justification, excuse, and mitigation. Under justification, we have 5 types of justification to criminal conduct. They are necessity, self-defense, defense of others, prevention of crime, and defense of property. Number 2 is the excuses. The excuses are, there are 8 types, and they are insanity. Number 2 is diminished capacity. Number 3, infancy. 4, intoxication. 5, mistake. 6, duress. 7, consent. 8, entrapment. The last area that we have under defenses to crimes is mitigations. There are 5 types of areas in mitigation. They are heat of passion killings, the imperfect self-defense, number 3, mistaken justification, 4, coercion and duress, and number 5 is diminished capacity. Now we're going to move on to our next section.